Helen Berresford is from the social justice charity Nacro. As I mentioned, Nacro helps resettle people with criminal records and is with us now. Helen, welcome to BBC Essex. Thank you for your time. How typical is Gary and indeed Elizabeth's son Ben's story?
Yeah, thank you. Morning. And firstly, I just wanted to share my condolences and sympathy with Elizabeth. That was such a powerful story. And also to Gary, you know, they both so powerfully put forward challenges that people face from prison. And it's absolutely the case that, you know, for some people, the barriers to moving on are really high. And actually, we do need to make sure that there's far more support, like both Elizabeth and Gary said, across mental health, across substance misuse services, but to give people any chance of actually being able to move forward with their lives. I mean, I think both of them really highlighted how COVID particularly made this period even harder for people leaving prison. I think, you know, as for all of us, you know, the world is so different to how it was a year ago, and leaving prison during this period is incredibly difficult because so much support is now offered remotely. And, you know, for some people that has been a positive experience, but for some whose needs are higher, it can be incredibly difficult. But, you know, we are talking in many ways about just some of the basic things that people need on release from prison. You know, that's somewhere to live, enough money, as Gary said, to be able to feed yourself, to have a start, to get back on your feet, but also the support in place as well, whether it's mental health or substance misuse support, to be able to move forward. And those are the things in too many cases which are not there, and actually there has to be far more focus on putting those things in place.
Of course, we know that you go into prison for punishment, for a crime. Maybe you got in with the wrong people or made a silly mistake. Whatever's happened, you've done your time. Once you are let out of prison, surely that is when the support, the rehabilitation, if you like, needs to really begin. It's okay doing the rehabilitation once you're inside, but isn't it those early days and weeks and months when you are out of prison that you should need even more help to get you back on track and keep you on track?
Absolutely. And, you know, rehabilitation really should start from the minute somebody is sentenced for their crime. You know, that time in prison should absolutely be focused on making sure that when somebody is released, they're able to move forward and not go on to commit a crime. And you're absolutely right that kind of, these first few days, in fact, are a real window of opportunity for people. They're often motivated to move forward, you know, to go forward. And that's when they need that support. They need to be able to have money. You know, people are too often released with £46 discharge grant, which hasn't been increased for the last 20 years. They have to make claims for universal credit if they don't have work. That can often lead to delays if they're struggling without money. And even before the COVID pandemic, around 1,000 people were released from prison homeless every month. So that isn't helping people get back on their feet. They're far more likely to go on and commit another crime, and that's a huge cost to all of us.
It costs us more, as you say. If they end up back in prison, it's going to cost more, and it's no good for anybody. And that £46, you know, the grant that you're given as you're released from prison. I mean, that's supposed to that's it, is it? Here's your £46. Go off and, you know, how'd you get a job with a history that you've been inside, with an address of probably a hostel that's not, you know, in a desirable place, so your address is going to count against you, your background is going to count against you. How on earth do you get work?
And that is the reality. It can be really challenging. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloom about this, because it's not, you know, there are opportunities, there are chances to do this. There are services out there which will help. So, for example, you know, when people are coming out of prison, and if they're identified as needing help with finding somewhere to live or with money and financial issues, then they should be referred on to a charity like us at Nacro, where we can help them find somewhere to live before they leave prison, and then help them when they're released as well. So those services are in place. But, you know, as hard as staff at charities and volunteers will try, it's not always possible, because there simply isn't always the housing out there for people, or you know, it is difficult in getting into employment as well. I mean, there are more things here that the government can do. There's no doubt about it. I think we need to see a commitment to make sure that nobody is released from prison homeless and onto the streets. We need to see, as you said, that £46 increased, to tide people over until they can get into work, until they can get universal credit sorted, so they're not having to be in Gary's position where he's got 17 pence or 19 pence left for food. So we have to be able to do those things. And for people who are released from prison, it's often a race against the clock on that day of release to get all of this sorted, to get your universal credit, go to see your probation officer, etc., and get all that sorted. But for some people, and particularly those who are released on a Friday, that just can be too many things to get in place. And then for people released on a Friday, that often then they can be over the weekend struggling without all of those things set up for an even longer period of time. So there are definitely things that can be done. I was also said there is help if people are in Gary's position. He gave an example there where the charity he's working with, St Mungo's, helped in. There are charities and organisations out there, so I would say do try and get that support. There are a lot, food banks out there at the minute helping people, and the growing kind of demand during the pandemic. And there are people that we run a resettlement advice service. If people are struggling, can't get any services in their area, don't know where to look, they can call that service or email that service, and we can help them with that. And that will also help them if they've got a criminal record and want to get an employment but don't know what to do about that criminal record.